Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build one of these Panthers. This box is the somewhat recently released 15mm or 1/100th scale late war Panther A with Zimmerit from Battlefront for their game Flames of War. Before we go too far, I would like to make it clear that Battlefront did send me this box for the purpose of making this video, and I would like to offer them my gratitude and thanks for that. There were no conditions attached, and I'll be giving you an honest look at these models. As you can see here on the front of the box, there are 5 vehicles included in this kit. The back of the box also tells us the same thing. Also that there is a decal sheet and 4 unit cards. There's also an exploded diagram that serves as instructions, as none are included in the box. There are also slightly more comprehensive instructions on the Flames of War website, and there is a link to that in the description. However, the model is quite simple to put together, so the exploded diagram should be plenty of guidance. This is what we get inside the box: 3 sprues of tank, 1 of crew figures, and a baggie with unit cards and decals inside. The plastic in this kit is about what I would expect of current Battlefront plastics, which is to say they're quite good. The plastic is nice and solid and the parts are neatly moulded. As always, mould lines are there because they're always there, but in the case of these sprues they're very minor and shouldn't be any issue to clean up. The detail is also pretty decent, though this is of course a gaming piece and b in a small scale, so some detail is bound to be simplified or omitted completely. One thing I've seen a lot of comments on about this kit is the Zimmerit. The squares of Zimmerit are a bit big and chunky looking, and some people seem very upset by this. Personally, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not a big fan of Zimmerit in the first place, so if I was forced to pick, I would use the Panthers without Zimmerit. Mentioning the Zimmeritless Panther, I will point out that a lot of the parts in this kit are the same as Battlefront's slightly older Panther and Jagd Panther kit, like the tracks, and the sprue with the skirts, exhausts, and guns. That's not a bad thing, of course, it's a pretty good kit. I think it would be a pretty dumb idea to redesign and retool perfectly fine parts that already exist. I think the tracks, which get their own sprue, look pretty good with this kit, same as the older kit I just mentioned. The tread detail is very nice. It's nice to see single track parts that have some effort put into detail. Often it is very simplified. I mean, it is a bit simplified on these too, but only at the bottom where it won't be visible anyway. In my opinion, all of the tank sprues look pretty good. There is also this Commander figure sprue. This is a fairly old one, it says 2013 on it, and it does seem to just be generic German crews. That's fine, and they do look good. For those wanting to include crews, this is of course a nice addition. I normally have all of my tanks buttoned down, so I won't be using them. Here are the decals. These do look to be a simple set of German numbers and crosses, but one thing I like here is that they've got half crosses. They're labelled front right, so presumably they go on the right at the front. The painted up images on the box and in the instructions don't include the crosses at all, but I'm assuming the cross on the right is intended to be partially obscured by tools or something. It's cool that they've done this to save you the effort of cutting the decals. Also included are these cards. The big one was folded over to fit in with the others. It's not the end of the world, but I would have preferred that it wasn't folded over. This has some information you might find useful when fielding Germans in games of Flames of War. There are also some cards for the tanks. 1 for the company HQ Panther, and 2 for regular old non-HQ Panthers. Unless I'm missing something, they have more or less the same stats. I do like the idea of cards when playing Flames of War. For somebody like me who is very forgetful, I can see them being really helpful. Okay, so that's what you get in the box. Now let's build. The first step is a simple one. Glue the track sets to the lower hull part. There is also a bit of an issue here. The track sets will not sit as far back as they should. They seem to be being held a tiny bit forward by the Zimmerit on the lower hull front. You can see this results in a bit of a gap between the 2 parts at the side, in above the tracks. When building this, I suspected it might cause an issue, but I went ahead anyway, just to see how the kit would build up without extra work. I glued the parts together, and the gap remained. At this stage it didn't look to be the worst thing ever, and to be fair, it's really not that bad. My suggestion would be to file down the inside of the final drive casings on the track sets, the part that will contact the front of the hull. Just file it down a little bit until the parts go together as they should. It looks to me like you'll need to remove about 1 millimeter of material, maybe a bit less. I'll be doing that on the other tanks in this box when I do build them. I'm just speculating here, but I think the reason this happens is the Zimmerit on the lower hull part is an addition to the existing hull bottom part. The tracks are from the earlier kit with no Zimmerit, so there's no consideration being given to that extra material under the final drive parts. You can see that there's a fit issue here when I try to add the upper hull as well. This also seems to be brought on by the tracks. The front of the upper hull ends up with a bit of an overhang. In Fog of War's video about this kit, he suggests gluing the upper and lower hull parts together before adding the tracks, so that might be worth trying as well. I glued the part down anyway. My plan was to use pressure to force it to fit how it should. I focused this on the front of the hull because that's the area it's going to be most obvious if it doesn't fit together well. I think I was fairly successful with this. It looks decent enough anyway. I then make sure the rear part is glued down as well. I don't want the hull coming apart, of course. You can see here that I haven't managed to get the hull top on perfectly. Looking at the back, it's obvious that one side is sitting a bit lower than the other. I added the hull rear part and a good amount of pressure, which I believe corrected the unbalanced part, or at least is working to hide it. It doesn't look quite so obvious with the rear plate on. I then installed the exhausts. These look nice and go on quite easily. There is an option for one of the multi-pipe exhaust parts, but I like the look of the 2 single pipes, so that's what I went with. Then comes the hull machine gun. There are 2 of these, one with Zimmerit and one without. I chose the one with it. I did manage to break the gun. To be fair, it's a very thin part, so it's not hard to break, though I would suggest saving yourself a little bit of extra work and just not breaking it. I feel like the Zimmerit on this hull MG doesn't quite match the rest of the tank, though I'm not super worried about it. When the gun's mount is in place, I add the broken off gun barrel, feeling very fortunate that I didn't lose it on the floor. I was surprised how well I was able to fix it actually. You can't really tell that it's been snapped off. I then add the gun cleaning kit. I sit the part in place on the left side of the hull, obviously holding the hull such that gravity will hold the cleaning kit in place. Then I add extra thin glue, which I've been using for the entirety of this build, which will seep around the bottom of the part and bond it in place. Next, it's time for the skirts. You can leave these undamaged, but I thought it would be interesting to bend them up a bit. I couldn't find the small pliers I would normally do this kind of thing with, so I just used my sprue cutters, being careful not to actually cut the part, except where I did cut the part to remove one panel of the skirting. Somebody in chat wanted me to do it, and I thought it would be interesting. You can of course leave these as new, or completely omit them. Either is fine. I glue the skirts onto the side of the hull like so. There are some rather big guide holdery things on the back of the skirts, and those are quite helpful when trying to position these. They do take a little bit of nudging and fiddling to get them on nicely against the hull. In the end though, I got them there and I think they look pretty good. As a final touch, I add some spare track links to the left rear side of the hull. These are an optional part, and I've chosen to put 2 sets of links on the left side and none on the right. There are 4 sets of links, so you can put them on however you like, assuming you like having 4 or less sets of spare track links. And that is the hull completed. Now it is turret time. I start by drilling out the main gun barrel, because why not? It's almost too small to drill out in my opinion, but I go carefully and do my best to drill directly in the centre. The result is a much better looking gun. I then glue the turret bottom into the top part. Though because I'm very clever, obviously, I forgot to film that. Either way, it slots into place quite easily. You can see on the bottom of the turret there's a space for a magnet. The kit doesn't come with magnets, but it does come with plastic pins that you could put in place of them. I actually forgot to magnetize this one, but it's not a hard thing to do. I'm sure you can figure it out yourself. At any rate, the main part of the turret looks pretty decent, and it is very simple to put together. Next comes the inner mantlet part, if that's what you would call this. This mounts into the rectangular recess on the front of the turret. You could try putting it on other parts of the turret, but I wouldn't recommend it. Then comes the outer mantlet. I wasn't 100% sure I got this part the right way up. I think I did, but it's kind of hard to tell. I follow that with the commander's hatch, which goes into place where you would expect it to go, which is on the commander's cupola. There's a tiny gap in the part, but that's because I accidentally nicked it with my knife. Otherwise it looks quite good. A notable omission on this kit is the lack of a machine gun for the cupola. Not really a big deal in my opinion though. I'm sure a lot of players have got spare machine guns in their bits boxes anyway. The final step is to install the main gun. Well, there are some other details you could add, like some spare track links and spare wheels, but I'm not including those on this tank, so this is the final step. The gun is very easy to install. There isn't really any keying for it, so you do have to kind of eyeball the positioning yourself, both by rolling it so that the muzzle brake sits how it should, with the openings to the sides, and by nudging it side to side so that it's nice and straight. You shouldn't find that to be too much of an issue though. I mean, I've managed to get it on nice and straight, so I'm sure you can too. And that's it. The 15mm scale Panther A with Zimmerit by Battlefront is now completed. I'm pretty happy with this model. It did have a couple of fit issues, though they could be avoided with a little bit of extra work. The tank has ended up looking pretty good despite those issues anyway. It is of course very similar to the earlier Panther kit from Battlefront. As I mentioned before, it even has shared components with that kit. Just this one doesn't come with the Jagd Panther upper hull and is covered in Zimmerit. I've seen a lot of people complaining about the Zimmerit in this kit. I don't think it's that bad really. When you look at tanks with Zimmerit like this, it often seems like there are larger squares with finer lines across them. That might be the case here, just the finer lines have been omitted. I don't know, personally I'm not that worried about it. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Zimmerit to begin with, and if it does displease you, there's always the option of the other Panther kit with no Zimmerit, assuming you're not too worried about the variant of the Panther that you're using. The other Zimmeritless Panther is a G variant, I believe, while this kit is the Panther A. Zimmerit or no, I think the model looks pretty good. The detail is fairly reasonable. In the usual Battlefront style, it is a little bit chunky, so a lot of the details kind of stand out because of that. That should help make those details like tools a bit easier to paint, which I think is a good thing. Some people don't like that chunky style, and that's fine, everyone's entitled to their opinions. Personally, I don't mind it. As I always seem to end up having to say with these kits, this is a gaming piece, not a super detailed display piece. Playing games like Flames of War with a detailed display model is a great way to end up spending all of your spare time making repairs, or just having broken models. No matter how many times I say that, there's always going to be some grognard who whines about it not being as detailed as a 1/35th display kit or something. Oh well, it works very well for what it is. You can clearly see that it's a Panther, and that it does Panther things, like panthing. The build was quick but enjoyable. It is straightforward and not especially challenging, except maybe in getting the tracks and front of the hull to go together nicely. But sometimes you don't really want a challenge. Sometimes it's just nice to sit back and have a relaxing time gluing bits of plastic together. And I think the ease of construction will definitely appeal to a lot of gamers. And that's really who this kit is for. I was able to get this tank built in a single stream. Building on stream does make it take a bit longer than it normally would, so I would imagine that you could build this entire box of Panthers rather quickly. I think it would make for a nice afternoon project. Speaking of building on stream, if you would like to watch me build models like this, head on over to my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Herbert_Erpaderp or follow the link in the description. Give me a follow and you'll be notified when I go live. It'll be good times, so come hang out and say hi. Self-promotion aside, what do you think of this kit? Have you got Panthers in your Flames of War army? Do you play Flames of War? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Also, once again, thank you very much to Battlefront for sending me this kit. I appreciate it greatly. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a YouTube member or patron, and all of the other things you do on YouTube and social media. Links to all of my things are in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.